So I want to welcome everybody to today's topics in tech. Our presenters today are Avinash Prasad, who is working at Google, and Alexa Stein, who is working at Rapid7. And Avinash.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
And when
That's going to happen a lot. You might want to mute all of your
I will mute my device.
Amazon devices.
I will mute my device. And Avinash was one of the first tutors who worked in the CIS Sandbox even before we rebranded 10 years ago. And we were talking a little bit about that before. And Alexa graduated about 2 years ago.
2019, yeah.
In 2019, and is now working at Rapid7. So it's so cool to have you guys back. Somebody from the very beginning and somebody who graduated more recently. So Avinash, we'll give you the next 20 minutes or so and take away.
Perfect. So again, before we go in, I just want to tell you that I have multiple screens in front of me. So you may see my eyes wander from one to another. Yeah, so don't worry about that. So again, Mark reached out to me, I think, a couple months back, and kind of offered for me to, come back to CIS Sandbox and speak about some of my experiences. So I thought it to be an amazing, opportunity to come back and see how CIS Sandbox has been doing. Like Mark suggested, I was there since the inception of Sandbox. Back in the days, we used to call it CIS Lab, and it was nothing like it is today. So I have a couple of slides where I'm going to talk about kind of my background, part of my story and my experience working at Google. All of these are kind of like my, very personal experiences. So I just want you to feel comfortable asking me questions. And again, I do have some of the, again, housekeeping stuff that I want to mention, because again, I'm speaking at a kind of like a public venue here. So today I'm speaking in my personal capacity here today. Think of me as a Bentley grad who happens to work at Google. I'm not representing Google. That's kind of I'm required to say here. Again, everything that I'm discussing today is basically from the public domain. So I've been able to include QR codes of URLs where you can go read in more detail. So, take that as an opportunity to dig a little bit more deeper into the topics that I would cover. And of course, I'm happy to discuss all of these in much detail offline if anyone is interested in learning about, these pieces more. And of course, I'm happy to connect with you all on LinkedIn and offer any kind of advice that you may need regarding your career, any kind of professional coaching that you may need. You can certainly reach out to me. I also want to encourage everyone to ask questions. I don't have much of a kind of like a talk track here. This is basically a bunch of things that I put in together, and I'm basically just going to talk through it. So based on what your interests are, I can dive a little bit deeper on some of the pieces. And again, I did hear someone was looking to learn more about analytics. Unfortunately, I'm not touching that today, but that would be a good topic to cover offline sometime. So again, what do I do? Who am I, right? So my current role at Google is of a customer engineer, and I'm concentrating on the hybrid cloud space. So what that means is basically I work closely with customers in identifying their cloud needs and helping them formulate their cloud strategy from a technology point of view. So once that's done, I would basically get in with technical folks at customer side and help them realize the goals that they have identified. So essentially think of me as someone who basically helps customer be successful while adopting Google Cloud. I hope that makes some sense. So who am I? Again, I'm basically an engineer at heart. Just happy exploring new technology, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to help other customers, mostly enterprises, kind of solve their technical challenges when they are trying to transform their business. So I just love this job. Um, so I wanted to kind of speak a little bit about the CIS lab itself. The CIS sandbox has played an important role in kickstarting my tech career here in US. I have a very special attachment to the CIS sandbox. Like I said earlier, I was associated with it even before it was Sandbox. I distinctively remember my first conversation with Mark over a decade back. And, he came with a vision and he wanted to basically transform the CIS lab to CIS Sandbox. Uh, and I know it has been successful. One of the goal at the time was to basically, get CIS Sandbox featured into the campus tour, which I believe was successful. I think a couple of years after I left, 2012 or 13, I think. Back in the days, people going for the campus tour would basically stop by the trading floor, and maybe 1 in 20, 30 people would just peep in the CIS lab to see what it was and not even enter it. So I think that has changed. And, I'm really happy to see how it has transformed. So that's my story. I want to speak a little bit about working at Google. So uh, um, working at Google has been one of the most exciting part of my decade-long, professional career here in Google. I grew up as a geek and I was always fascinated by Google, but at no point of time I had thought I would be working for Google. So I want to talk about how I got started, and maybe that would help you guys to think about it and maybe explore opportunities at Google. So before working at Google, I was working at a healthcare tech company, and I was working there as a technical architect. My responsibilities were towards the backend infrastructure for hosting the software that my company was selling back then. I used to work extensively with Amazon and Microsoft engineers, for their AWS and Azure offerings, but I was not at the time working with Google. So few years back, I happened to come across, a few of the engineers at Google at a tech conference, and kind of, just it was a meeting by chance, and I talked to them. And while speaking to them, I realized what Google had been doing in the cloud space was, really ahead of its time. So at that point of time, I basically started working with those engineers. And again, at my last company, it was a customer of AWS and Azure. So happened to sign up for Google as a customer, and then started working with those engineers. And during this process of working with them, one of the engineers basically kind of prompted me to explore opportunities at Google, because again, they thought I was good at what I was doing, and they believed at the time that my skills would be helpful in the cloud side. So I applied, without thinking much about it, and in next 3 months, over a very extensive interview process, I made it. Believe me, it was unreal. I did not imagine I would be able to land that offer, but it did happen. And 2-3 months later, when I was basically walking into the Google Cambridge office, they call it Google campus, uh, I just couldn't believe I'm walking there as an employee. So bottom line, I want to kind of encourage you everyone to basically look at opportunities at Google and see if you fit in there. There's opportunities for every sort of job, right from software engineer to project managers to uh, product managers. And again, the cloud has been growing really fast, so there's a lot on the cloud front as well. So I'm going to take a pause here and see if there's any question.
Did you attend anywhere after Bentley?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Did you go to did you further your schooling after Bentley, after your 4 years
No,
undergrad?
no, so that's a good question. So I was at Bentley for my master's. I already had a undergrad degree in engineering from India. And before coming to Bentley, I was working in Europe. So, uh, you know, basically, Bentley was the first place where when I landed in US. And in fact, CIS Sandbox, or at the time CIS Lab, was my first job here in US. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let's just kind of move on. So let's get into a little bit tech stuff. Like I said earlier, I'm basically going to be talking more from the public domain, and all of these are specific to Google, but can be generalized for other cloud offerings as well. AWS and Azure, they all have their own uniqueness. But in general, everything that I'm going to talk broadly does apply to both Amazon and Microsoft for their cloud offerings. So, so let's talk about the several of the applications that we use in our daily lives and how does this map to the cloud, right? So what you see here in your screen is basically some of the most common applications that you would be using today from Google. And all of these applications can essentially be categorized as software as service. Now we all as end users, and when I say end users, I'm specifically talking about consumer end users. We don't necessarily get into trying to figure out what exactly goes behind these services. But when you look at a lot of larger enterprises, they have to kind of figure out how they would do what Google has been doing for themselves. So one thing to note here is that all of these applications are in terms of scale huge, over 1 billion users for each of these applications. So um, I, like I mentioned, all of these services can be categorized as SaaS, and for several other enterprises who are today operating in the digital world, they have to kind of offer their own SaaS offerings. So I'm talking about, for example, an apparel company, providing an application to its buyer where they can virtually try apparels and shoes before they place their order, right? So for example, an online furniture seller allowing its buyer to ability to place a furniture in their bedroom using augmented reality before they make the purchase. So all of those are essentially SaaS services. Further examples, like there are, you would have heard of several companies who work in the business to business domain. Things like companies like Sales, for example, Salesforce. They sell their software to a lot of businesses for them to kind of not automate, but kind of make their sales processes efficiently. All of those are cloud services in one form or the other. So now let's look at some of the services that you see here. All of these services are operate at a huge scale, and operating at those scales brings a lot of unique challenges. uh, mm, Again, a lot of unique, essentially engineering challenges, which we as users don't realize. So what Google has been doing over the years is basically solving those engineering challenges. And now with cloud, all of those the tools and technologies that Google developed is available to other enterprises for them to use and basically um, revolutionize their services delivery. So we'll look more into it. Let me just go to the next one. Again, so what you see here in this slide is basically some of the more applications which are not so common. Things like a campaign manager, AdWords, their Stadia. Again, that's also in the consumer domain. But maps, if for example, that is used by Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb to deliver services for their customers. So all of these are used by enterprises. So let's look into how essentially, or rather what it takes to deliver these services. And I think I have a video in the next slide. I'm gonna just play the video and hope you guys get the sound. If not, there is closed captioning on the bottom bar, and I have also included QR code for the video. So let's listen. So, quick question: what did you think about the video?
I don't think we heard it
Anyone?
well.
Sorry, Mark, you were saying something.
The audio didn't come through for me. I don't know if it did for anybody else. We saw the pictures. Maybe you can summarize it.
Yeah. So let me go to the next. So the video basically was released in 2015 as a April Fool's Day video. So Google has this long tradition of, kidding about things that they are very serious. What the video talked was kind of this imaginary thing which basically sits in the real cloud, and all your services, all the data, everything sits over there. That was not correct. Again, but the video did talk about some of the pieces which are true today. It talked about servers, it talked about data centers, it talked about network storage, and a lot more things. So I'm just gonna kind of briefly touch upon these pieces and hope I give you enough of a preview of what exactly is there in the cloud. So first thing, again, data centers. So what essentially is a data center? Google has something it calls data center campuses, which comprises of several large data centers in very close proximity. Again, they all are connected with very fast network, everything basically fiber network. Each of these data centers are several football fields inside, and all of these data centers are essentially, hosting servers. That segues into the next slide. So On your right, what you see is basically inside view of one of these data center. Those pipes and the primary colors. Those all are essentially used for running coolants to cool down these servers. On your right, you see basically long aisles of servers sitting there, again, ready to process the data that it gets, right? The QR code that you see over there is basically a link to a paper that Google engineers wrote, I think almost 15 years back, explaining how these servers are meant to work and tandem together, to crunch large amount of data and essentially, mm, deliver the services that we talked about earlier. The next component that I wanted to talk about was basically the networks, right? The Google data centers, different campuses, they are spread globally, and all of them are connected through fiber optics network, all owned and managed by Google. This gives Google a unique advantage when it comes to delivering services. They are able to deliver services from the closest data center to the user. So say, for example, if you are trying to access Gmail today from here in Massachusetts, your Gmail could be coming from anywhere in North Virginia or South Carolina. Looking at the map, if you say, for example, fly to Europe, you could be opening up your Gmail, and that would be delivered from Frankfurt or Netherlands, for that matter. So it has that kind of intelligence built into it, recognizes where the user are and is able to deliver those services from the closest point. Google also has point of presence, the gray dots that you see, that is again at multiple different ISP providers like Verizon, AT&T, Comcast. That is, those pops are essentially entry point to Google's network. So say, for example, you are trying to watch a YouTube video. Those videos could be delivered to you from one of these points if it is cached there. If not, when you request for that video, your request goes through these pops into closest data center and comes out from where it was stored. The QR code would link to some of the CDN capabilities that Google has today. Again, an interesting read. I would certainly encourage you guys to have a look at that. The next component I wanted to talk about was storage. Again, I think we are running short of time, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I want you to understand that the data storage in various form is at the core of the cloud. Everything that you can think of in terms of digital data gets stored, and Google does that by encrypting the data. So every time you are storing something, it gets encrypted. That segues into security and privacy. So when you think of security and privacy in the public cloud, there are two ways to look at it. One, again, from a consumer point of view, which we all are today. Google takes the user privacy very seriously, so everything is encrypted. And also for enterprises, when they are putting their customers' data, they are very serious about the security of that data. So by default, Google would encrypt that data, and again, it's kind of safe. Let me just put it that way. Google has also invested heavily in Project Zero. That's something which when I heard about it first time few years back, it was really an eye-opening thing for me. I'm not sure if you guys had heard about Meltdown and Spectre, I think 2 years back. It kind of took the tech industry by storm. These two vulnerabilities were discovered by the Project Zero engineers, and again, they basically released fixes for those. The QR code talks about those two pieces in case you guys are interested. Let's move on. So now I want to draw your attention towards what we all know of Google's core offering, search, right? So here you see your data center aisle full of servers in front of that plain vanilla text search box. And I think it's a very apt representation, because the servers that you see in the background is what it takes to deliver those search queries results in such lightning fast speed. But again, many folks, they may not want to know about it. So, you know, uh, this is what we have come to love of Google, right? A simple text box where you type your queries and it gives you results, doing everything behind the scene without you having to worry about it. And again, I know this was kind of really fast and very high level. So I hope I was able to pique some interest about the cloud for you guys. Again, I would be very happy to discuss anything in detail offline if anyone is interested. So with that, I'll open it up for question, and let me go to the Zoom tab so that I can see folks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Avinash, could you share with us your LinkedIn info in the chat so people who want it can grab it? And if you have a question for Avinash, feel free to either ask it or raise your hand and I'll call on you. And Avinash, if you can stop sharing, that would be good. Then we can see everybody.
I think I did. Oh,
Thank you. And Avinash, also, if you can pass along your slides, I'll post them so everybody can get the QR codes and the links to the videos later and watch them again.
yeah, sure.
Questions for Avinash about Google or the cloud at Google or that awesome slide of all of Google's servers behind the Google search box? Okay, Zach, tell me something that was impressive to you from Avinash's presentation. Zach.
I thought it was impressive that he was working with Amazon and Microsoft engineers and just decided because he happened to meet some Google engineers to apply, and then went through the whole review process, which it sounded like it was a very long process. Cool. All the way to get there.
Thank you.
So I want to add a little bit more color to it. It took me a little over 3 months to get in, and that was very quick from Google's point of view. Believe me, there were colleagues in my own team who took anywhere from 6 months to a year to get in. So Google does have this thing. And again, this may not directly apply to folks who are applying immediately out of undergrad. Those are a little bit fast tracked to align with, your graduation dates. But for experienced professionals, 3 months is actually accelerated one.
Great. Thank you. So I'm curious real quick, before we go on to Alexa, we can have some conversation between both of you after. Of the services that we saw on the screen, what Google Cloud services do many of you use now? If you use any Google Cloud service, just type it in the chat so we can see which ones people are using right now. And you can make that a public message to everybody. So which Google Cloud services do you make use of?
I think the chat is only to you and the co-host.
Really? Well, we'll change that.
Yeah, and in fact, when I shared, I think it went only to you, Mark.
Okay, I think I fixed that. Thanks. Okay, try again. We have 3 people using Google Drive, and here is that. Okay, cool. So while you guys finish this up, we'll begin to change gears and move over to Alexis Stein.